I'm saying the tensions in Russia and Ukraine. I'm not saying they are not worrying me, but this is certainly not the only worrying thing in the world today, and it's certainly not the only pending invasion. While we have ongoing invasions already all over the world.
Yeah, I mean they concern me too, but I mean just from what I'm experiencing here in America is like at least as it regards Russia and Ukraine right now, there seems to me like in the media and political class, there seems to be this frustration with the public that they're not, getting out in the streets and marching against Russian intervention in Ukraine when these very same people either ignored or slandered the people marching against U.S. intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it seems to be this idea that it's your duty to speak out against the actions of other countries that you are not a citizen of, but the conduct of your own government and the politicians you theoretically vote for or are subject to you ideally is not of your concern. And in fact, like by you singling them out, you're ignoring these more serious problems, or you're not a serious person in some way.
Yeah, it reminds me of a famous line by the German playwright Bertolt Brecht, who in one of his poems said that the government didn't like how the people voted, so they decided to change the people. So actually, that's what's happening in so-called representative parliamentary democracies, and also in the United States, but also all over Europe. You know that elected governments don't have any kind of commitment or responsibility to the citizens themselves. And when the citizens criticize the acts or crimes of their own governments, then those citizens, or even those who are not citizens, like Julian Assange, become dissidents. I would say that reading or following the American media, not just the American media, you have it also in the European liberal media or censure media. You always have this kind of cynicism, I would say, and always talking about the dissidents of China, the dissidents of Russia, of Saudi Arabia, or I don't know whom. But rarely are people like Snowden, Assange, Daniel Hale, Chelsea Manning actually called dissidents. Dissidents in the sense that they're the real patriots. They're the real patriots in the sense that some of them, like Snowden, they took the Constitution more seriously than the government of the United States. And that's the reason why he ended up extradited in a way from the United States. Why not extradited, but in a way, why he had to escape the United States and get a political asylum, not because he loves the weather in Russia,
Yeah.
it's pretty cold in Russia. So as we know, so I think that's the true problem. And I think the Belmarsh Tribunal, but also all the people who are in one way or the other way, and it's many, many people already involved in the tribunal or the allies of the Progressive International, different movements. What we are trying to do is to try to save some of those people if we can. We know very well from our historic experience that these struggles take years or sometimes decades. How many years did Nelson Mandela need to get free? Of course, I don't want Julian Assange to stay in prison for so long because, as you might probably know, at the last hearing in October, he had a stroke in prison because, this guy already suffered so much. For the last 10, 11 years, he was without son, in complete isolation for the last 3 years, in isolation at the embassy. For what? For revealing war crimes. And I think we should insist and reiterate the point that this is about the crimes and war crimes of not just the United States governments, but also its allies. And that most of those people, Tony Blair, George Bush, many others, are still alive, still free, while the whistleblowers and the dissidents are in prison, or others will also end up in prison.
And, while it was going on, I think people had an idea of what Assange's situation was like when he was, stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy. But now that he's been removed from there and in custody, it's sort of like that was the point of it because his name and the conditions he's facing has dropped out of public view. I mean, we talked about Belmarsh prison and how notorious it is. Like, of what do we know of the conditions that Assange is currently existing in British custody, and what he will face theoretically when extradited to America for espionage?
Yeah, I mean, I had the luck to visit him several times at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and I also visited him, and that was the first and last time that I saw him at the Belmarsh prison in early November 2019. And so I can compare the situation, at the Ecuadorian embassy at that time when I was visiting, he at least had the internet until Lenin Moreno cut the internet because of a deal with the IMF and with the United States. So he was then already the last months before he was kicked out in that brutal way from the Ecuadorian embassy, although he had political asylum until that moment. Before those months, he didn't have internet. He was completely isolated. But at the Ecuadorian embassy during those 6-7 years, he could at least have visitors. He could use the internet. As you know, WikiLeaks was publishing leaks, which were annoying a lot of people, of course. So even more people hated him because of the character assassination, which was taking place since the so-called Swedish case. There is a great book by Niels Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, which was just published, called The Trial of Julian Assange, where he shows in which way also this character assassination functions. We have to say that many among the left believed that Julian Assange was a demon, that he was a monster. They actually believed what the intelligence services were putting through different mainstream media or social networks. But to come to your question, at the Ecuadorian embassy, the conditions were still, although they were really bad, they were still human in a way. Although he couldn't move out of this tiny space, he didn't see the sun for 7 years, and he was under constant pressure. But compared to Belmarsh prison, it's very difficult to compare it. I visited Belmarsh prison. It's not that exotic in a way as Guantanamo, that far away or on an island on Cuba, which by the way was also occupied and is still occupied. But this Belmarsh Guantanamo is in southeast London. You can reach it by tube and train, and you come there, and it's one of the most secure prisons in the United Kingdom. He's quite isolated there, basically in solitary confinement. And the kind of pressure he's undergoing was shown precisely last year when he had a stroke. But compared to Belmarsh prison, I think a US high security prison would be a death sentence for him. And this is what his lawyers are saying. This is why they are appealing. This is something what many people and organizations around the world, from Amnesty International to Courage Foundation to many Nobel Prize winners, politicians all across Europe, are also seeing and claiming that extraditing him to the United States would be a death sentence. And what they already succeeded is to silence the man. And whether you liked him or not, his voice was one of the most important voices of the early 21st century. We learned so much through WikiLeaks. It's a library of not just war crimes, but of diplomacy, of politics. If you read WikiLeaks, you can actually understand how politics or the corporative sector functions. So I think we should really cherish and value that.
I mean, like, leaving aside what you may or may not think about Julian Assange, the man, like, I remember when WikiLeaks was happening at, like, while the, Iraq war was going on, and I would follow all this and I would lose my mind about, nothing the media says or does seems to move the needle. But like what WikiLeaks put out there was just about the only thing that made the US and UK governments during the height of the war on terror afraid at all, or that bothered them. It's because nothing else the media covered or reported on couldn't be metabolized or then like reinterpreted, or like whereas WikiLeaks was something that was genuinely a break with the kind of consensual reality that they manage and govern.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I completely agree with you. And unfortunately, the Belmarsh Tribunal is mainly dealing with the United States this time because we are coming to New York City. But WikiLeaks, for instance, revealed many important documents about secret trade agreements, the so-called TTIP. They also revealed things about the International Monetary Fund, about Putin, about Assad. Although people were people. I mean, not people, but different politicians and secret intelligence wanted to portray Julian as a Russian Russian spy or whatever, But WikiLeaks also revealed stuff about secret documents about Russia or from Russia, from Syria, about Libya, about many countries, about Frontex, about how the European Union is dealing with the refugee question in the Mediterranean, which is in a way a consequence of all our invasions. I'm not saying it's your invasions, Americans. It's also ours, European. It's take Libya. The role of France and Nicolas Sarkozy in Libya, but also the role of Hillary Clinton in Libya. And then take the numbers of people who are fleeing these countries because of our invasions. And then in the end, you have a situation of rising extreme right-wing extremism, for instance, nationalism all across Europe, building walls and so on, because these peoples are coming to our countries. Of course, they are coming to our countries because we destroyed their countries. Where else should they go?
Yeah, I mean, what would you do in that situation? I mean, I guess like just thinking about all this, it just I mean, they're like these states, like whether it's the United States or the United Kingdom, certainly can provide all these examples of the things that will happen to you, or like what power really means when it comes down on you if you color outside the lines. If you reveal the conduct of the way the world is actually managed, the way the reasons our wars are actually fought, and the people who actually died in them or suffered in them, this is what will happen to you. And I guess like my last thought here is like for the Belmarsh Tribunal. I mean, just like how do you take on I don't know that responsibility or just the weight of like providing the counterexample to the example of like what these states will do to you if you fuck with them.
Yeah, I think the counter example is exactly the tribunal. If you look at the range of people, members of the tribunal who are taking part in it now for already 2 years. From Roger Waters to Chomsky, from Edward Snowden to former Guantanamo detainees, to artists like Milo Rao and others. I think you should just pose the question: would you rather be in the company of Donald Rumsfeld and George W. Bush, or would you rather,
Yeah.
or would you rather be in the company of Roger Waters and some of the clearest and most interesting minds of our century, and activists who have some of them, like Tariq Ali? He was actually part of the Russell Tribunal. He traveled to Vietnam. He was traveling there, collecting evidence for 6 weeks under the bombs. Would there be in the company of courageous people than in the company of the war criminals? And I think this is a big choice. I know that many people cannot make that choice. Many people are forced to put their head down until they end up in shit. But to put your head, even if you can face consequences, is one of the most beautiful things in the world.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Shreshel, thank you so much. The Belmarsh Tribunal kicks off on February 25th in New York City. For our listeners, if they're interested in it, if they want to attend, if they want to contribute in some way, what should they do?
They should go. They should go to the website of the Progressive International, which is progressive.international, and then there they will find more information. They could also connect via some of our partners, which is DN25, The Intercept, People's Dispatch, the People's Forum, where it's actually happening, and many other organizations who are part of it. But check out progressive.international. You can register. You will get a live stream link on Friday, and let's kick this off. Thanks a lot for the conversation.
Thank you. And the links will be in the show description. The links will be in the episode description on your website. All right. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
All right. Bye. Thank you for your time.
Bye bye.